Facts about Black Death in England. Hello. In this video we are discussing about facts about Black Death in England. Before anything else, please like this video and follow our YouTube channel for further updates. The terrible bubonic plague that decimated towns throughout Europe from October 1347 to around 1352. The Black Death is one of the deadliest disasters in recorded history and profoundly altered the social and economic structure of the continent. How well versed are you in the Black Plague, though? Who perished? Did the plague truly kill off a third of the people in Europe? Did it affect each town and village, too? The Black Death was what? The Black Death, or pestilence, as contemporaries referred to different epidemic diseases, was the deadliest disaster in recorded history throughout the Middle Ages. Some called it magna mortality, emphasizing the high death rate. More people were killed by it than by any other known occurrence combined. The surviving were scarcely adequate to bury the dead, one observer observed. Nobody knew for sure what brought on the devastating plague. In 1347, the plague reached Western Europe, and in 1348, it reached England. Early in the year 1350, it vanished. Swellings, most frequently in the groin, armpits, and neck, dark patches, and bloody coughing were some of the signs of the Black Death. Different strains of the disease took anywhere from 5 days to as little as half a day to induce death, according to medieval witnesses and their modern counterparts who observed more recent epidemics in 19th century China and 20th century Vietnam. The Black Death is estimated to have killed 50 million people in Europe over 3 to 4 years. The population fell to 30 million people from about 80 million. In both rural and urban areas, at least 60% of the population perished. Manorial records from some locations, like a village on an estate in Cambridgeshire, attest to the fact that 70% of its tenants perished in a matter of months in 1349, and tax records from the city of Florence created shortly before and after the Black Death suggest that its toll may have been about the same in 1348. It is estimated that the Black Death caused the deaths of almost 50 million people. Many rural communities declined, including those that were destroyed, like Quab in Hampshire, and were in time deserted. People in the Middle Ages had no idea that some communities survived. All they knew was that everyone would undoubtedly perish. Some European communities were missed or scarcely touched by the plague, and it may not have spread to all large areas, such as ones in northern German-speaking lands. We will probably never be able to determine the precise death toll of the Black Death in Europe due to the state of record keeping and preservation. People in the Middle Ages responded to the Black Death with processions and prayers because they thought it was God's doing. A collection of tales shared among a group of young people seeking sanctuary from the Black Death outside of Florence may be found in Boccaccio's Decameron. Some of his contemporaries realized that the only cure for the disease was to flee from it. People needed medicine even if there was no proven cure. People demanded medications despite the lack of a recognized cure. Chaucer observed that the doctor of physic made a lot of gold out of the plague. In the 1890s, the plague bacteria were discovered in Asia, and a link between animals and fleas was made. Plagues can be treated with modern drugs, however, these are in danger due to evolving infections and antibiotic resistance. The Black Death first appeared in the East, as people in medieval times described it, and then it spread to the eastern Mediterranean, Italy, Spain, and France before moving north and west. Then it traveled to Britain, where it simultaneously impacted Dorset and Hampshire along the south coast of England. Then the plague moved to the east and north, and finally to Scandinavia and Russia. The Black Death's mode of transmission was it a result of black rats spreading the plague to people through fleas? Rats, often black ones, and fleas are repeatedly mentioned in academic monographs and textbooks about the Black Death and its subsequent waves of plague into the early 19th century in Europe. But what proof is there? Before the third pandemic at the end of the 19th century, no observers of the time noted any epizootic animal epidemic of rats or any other rodents before or during the Black Death, or during any subsequent plagues in Europe. However, descriptions of rat fall associated with a human illness characterized by buboes in the main lymph nodes date at least as far back as the 18th century in subtropical parts of China and Africa. Regarding fleas, there are no links between the seasonal reproduction cycles of different species of rat fleas and plague cases or deaths identified before the end of the 19th century, unlike during the so-called Third Pandemic, when there did. The three varieties of plague that plagued Europe during the Black Death, bubonic, pneumonic, and occasionally septicemic, were the cause of its deadly effects. Who suffered the most from the plague? Did the Black Death mostly impact the underprivileged? Youthful and old, male and female, royalty, commoners, archbishops, monks, nuns, and parish clergy were all impacted. The Black Death did not spare any group of people. Important knights, ladies, and businesspeople who perished during the Black Death are listed by contemporary chroniclers. Convents, friaries, and monasteries in wealthy and well-fed regions of Europe lost more than half of their membership, and some even went extinct. From the construction of cathedrals in Italy to the manufacture of pottery in England, both artisan and creative talents were lost or severely diminished. The English royal masons, the Ramsays, as well as Siena-based artists like the Lorenzetti brothers were killed. There weren't enough people to work the land and take care of the sheep and animals. Burial records and tax records indicate that the epidemic had progressed into one that primarily impacted the poor by the third or fourth wave of the plague in the latter decades of the 14th century. Which regions suffered the most from the Black Death? Some of the worst affected areas in 1348-1349 were in hilly, remote areas, such as Snowdonia in Wales or the mountain village of Mangona in the Alpi Fiorentine, north of Florence. These areas had fewer links with cities than areas lower on the slopes and nearer to cities. These remote villages may have had comparable experiences to small mining towns in Pennsylvania or South Africa or Inuit settlements in Newfoundland that were hit by the Great Influenza of 1918-19, a pandemic with a high mortality rate that was many times greater than in New York City or London. Cities like Milan and Douai in Flanders, both important centers of trade and industry, appear to have escaped the Black Death in 1348 nearly completely undamaged for reasons that are difficult to explain. According to the chronicles, only one home in Milan contracted the disease, and the plague was successfully suppressed. In the meantime, there are no definite traces of the plague invading that city before the plague of 1400 according to the Douai chronicles, monastery necrologies, and archival documents, which, among other things, record the deaths of magistrates and final wills and testaments. Has the Black Death been blamed for the murder of Jews or other minorities? Municipal governments, castellans, bishops, and the Holy Roman Emperor accused Jews of spreading the Black Death by poisoning foodstuffs and water sources and executed entire communities of men, women, and children as punishment throughout German-speaking regions, France along the Rhine, and sections of Spain. Between 1348 and 1351, the allegations and massacres, however, were not all pervasive. Massacres did not occur in the British Isles, where Jews had been driven out by Edward I in 1290, at least in England, and there is no conclusive proof that such violence occurred in Italy, except for the Catalans in Sicily. Massacres are not reported in the Middle East either. Early in the 15th century, in Venice, 40 days of isolation was used as the basis for the term quarantine, which refers to the exclusion and isolation of those arriving from plague-infected areas or of others suspected of carrying the disease, with biblical resonances. But the city of Ragusa, modern-day Dubrovnik, had outdone the Venetians in 1377 with a 30-day plague quarantine. By the early modern era, quarantine had frequently been further restricted. For some categories of suspicion, the time considered necessary to isolate suspected carriers in Milan during its epidemic of 1557-1575 had decreased to 8 days. In actuality, the illness never went away. Early in the 1990s, an epidemic in Surat, India, sparked fear throughout the world. The death of a herdsman from the bubonic plague in Kyrgyzstan in 2013 was greatly hyped in the media. How was the video? Do you like it? Post your response in our comments section below and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos.